Like to call the meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Sustainable Communities Working Group meeting. My name is Tracy Martinez. I'm the Deputy Mayor from Del Mar, and I'm first time chairing here, so it's a pleasure to be with you. Before we begin, I will pass it over to our interpreter, who will explain how to access interpretation services and devices.
Announcement from the interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are, click on the interpretation icon, the world, and select English as your language. If you're joining through the Zoom mobile app, please, cell phone or tablet, press the ellipsis, the 3 dots, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on the mute original audio, not to hear the original Spanish low in the backgrounds. The headsets are available for interpretation. If you're in the meeting room, please check out the headset from the receptionist at the lobby. Aviso por parte del intérprete. Para acceder el uso del servicio de interpretación, por favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, el globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, celular o tableta, presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si desea escuchar el original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio, silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles en el servicio de interpretación. Si usted cuenta en la sala de reunión, si usted se encuentra en la sala de reunión, por favor pedir auriculares a la recepcionista del vestíbulo. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now take a moment to acknowledge the land that we call home. The tribal nations of San Diego region has historically faced injustices. We acknowledge the harmony that existed between the land, nature, and the original peoples who have since endured displacement, persecution, and systemic oppression. We pay our respect to the unceded territory and homelands of the 18 tribal nations in our region, the most in any county in the United States, from our 4 cultural groups, the Kumeyaay, the Liseño, Copeño, and the Kawia. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of SANDAG community, we acknowledge this legacy. We aspire to learn from the indigenous traditional knowledge and experience in undoing the injustice of the past. In addition to our land acknowledgement, we take a moment to recognize and honor California Native American Day, an annual state holiday observed on the 4th Friday of September. California Native American Day is a time to reflect and honor the cultural history and contributions of California's indigenous peoples. Now please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would like to ask our clerk to confirm that we have a quorum today.
We have a quorum, Chair.
Thank you, clerk. Now I'd like to review the meeting process for both the working group members as well as the members of the public who wish to participate. For working group members, when you would like to speak, please raise your hand and I will call on you. Clerk, can you please provide a quick reminder of how the public comments will work today?
Yes, thank you, Chair. If you'd like to submit a public comment, if you're here in person, you can submit a public comment slip in the lobby, and then we'll grab those for regarding the item. And then online, if you could raise your hand by pressing the Zoom button, the raise hand, and then on your phone, you can press *9. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Now we will move along to item 2, non-agenda public comments. First, we will take SANDAG staff comments and then move to public comments and member comments. We will now hear from SANDAG staff, Carrie Simmons, for a brief announcement.
Good afternoon, everybody. I have two announcements today. The first is Chesley has already shared these announcements with you via email, but just as a reminder, we wanted to let everybody know that tomorrow at 9 a.m., staff will be presenting a 2025 regional plan update during a joint meeting of the Transportation, Borders, and Regional Planning Committees. This update is going to include an overview of all the public comments we've received and what the proposed changes to the draft plan are. If you're interested in reviewing the materials for this item or listening into the meeting, please let me know and we'll be happy to share the agenda packet and a Zoom link with you. Secondly, we want to thank all members and their staff who've submitted comments on our draft 2025 regional plan. Our staff has been actively coordinating with many of you to address the comments that you've provided. If you're interested in discussing the comments further with our team, a virtual meeting can be arranged upon request. To request a virtual meeting with our staff, please email regionalplan@sandag.org no later than September 26th so we can schedule a meeting with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Before we move to public comments, per our board policy, the amount of time allowed for each verbal public comment is determined based on the number of agenda items, complexity of those items, and the number of persons anticipated to offer comment. This allows us to hear from as many people as possible and to complete our business while we still have a quorum. Based on those factors today, we will limit the public speaking time to 2 minutes. Now, do we have any comments from the public, clerk?
We do, Chair. We have 2 in person and 1 online. The first in person is Michael Brando, followed by allegedly Audra.
Someone directed me to the agenda for today, and I thought I'd drop by and simply say, overall, you will not prevail. You have already failed. We do not consent. The word sustainability in itself is a code word. It has nothing to do with taking care of communities and bettering the earth. And the good news is that this charade is becoming more and more clear to many people. And to give you an idea of the evil that's going on in this local area among politicians, here's a quote. This politician said, "We should always treat each other with respect. We're not enemies of each other just because we have, quote unquote, different ideas." What a lie. It has nothing to do with having different ideas. It has to do with a tiny minority attempting to subjugate, control, and manage people in a way that's anti-human, anti-life, anti-creation. So the overarching goals of what you're here for are already failing. I really hope that many of you switch sides, and I'm not talking about the fake Democrat-Republican paradigm. I'm talking about something that's aligned more organically with truth and being a real person. Because from your positions, what's going to happen to you, what you're putting out there is all going to come back on you when you see this fail. And you may very likely see your careers ruined. I always like to end on a positive note. How good can it get? How good can it get?
Next is allegedly Audra, followed by Michael Rokmes online.
Yes, so what Michael is saying is very true. I think you guys need to tread lightly when you're pushing a globalist agenda about something you may not really understand what you're really engaging in. If you're not aware of the United Nations Agenda 21, you should become very educated on it to see what's being pushed by people and the 15-minute cities that are coming down the pike. And the fact that you're going to put yourself in one of those, and it's not about saving the planet. In fact, if people really cared about anything, you wouldn't sacrifice people just to pretend to save a planet that doesn't need saving. Instead, you don't look at the man-made weather modification, things like that. Instead, we work on changing people's behaviors to get them out of their cars, to put them in a 15-minute city. And in other countries in Europe, they're using ALPRs to keep people out of low emission zones. And that's the kind of stuff that's going to come down into San Diego. And as we talk about the things that are in your agenda, I just think that you guys, you know, whether or not you understand what you're doing, you should. And if you do and you're doing it, that's even more nefarious. Because it isn't about anything but control. And that's where the surveillance state comes in, just like Israel has, right? And we're, you know, right in bed with Israel, right? And it's sad to see what's happening, but biometrics are going to be coming, things like that. So you should be looking at China to go, is this the kind of life that we want, where you can't even go to the store or get gas, or maybe even, you know, go to the doctor if your social credit score isn't good enough? I mean, people walk across the street and they have their picture posted if they jaywalk. Is that the kind of lifestyle that you guys would like to live? Because that's what you're implementing slowly but surely. And it's very dangerous to do. So you should
Thank
course
Your time
correct.
has expired. Our last non-agenda public comment is by Michael Rolkmus online.
Hello. Am I able to share slides?
Just a moment.
Thanks.
Yeah, just a moment, Michael.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Michael. You can go ahead and share your screen. Go ahead. You have 2 minutes, Michael. Michael, I believe you're not unmuted.
Oh, apologies. Sorry about that.
Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Michael Rockmus. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Coordinator for the U.S. Green Building Council, California, and I'm here to give a very brief update on our work around building performance standards. If you aren't familiar with us, USGBC California is an independent nonprofit with the mission of transforming California into a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable place for all. We bring together the green building movement in California, helping with career development and connecting people across disciplines. Building performance standards are policies that cities, counties, or states can put into place that require existing large buildings to reduce their energy usage or greenhouse gas emissions over time. A few things that distinguish BPS policies from other building decarbonization policies are that first, they're for existing buildings, which is where most of the emissions from the building sector are. Second, they're the largest buildings, which usually means they apply starting between 20,000 square feet and 50,000 square feet, which means they focus on a relatively small number of buildings that are responsible for a disproportionately large share of emissions, making them easier to enforce. And third, they set clear long-term standards with interim targets. This allows the necessary building upgrades to be included in the normal operations and maintenance cycles of a building. Because of this, BPS are one of the most cost-effective ways to meet our climate goals. And more than a dozen cities and states across the country have BPS, but in California, only Chula Vista so far has a building performance standard. So we launched the Peer Learning Collaborative about 1.5 years ago with the goal of bringing together a few cities and counties that were thinking of adopting BPS. And we had the opportunity to join forces with NORESCO and get some funding. And so we brought it statewide, and it's the California Building Performance Standards Peer Learning Collaborative, Cal BPS PLC. Today we have 48 cities.
Thank you, Michael. Your time has expired. That concludes our public comment on this item, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any working group members for non-agenda comments or announcements that they would like to share with the group today? And if so, could you please raise your hand at this time? Okay, we'll start with you, Rob Freed from Carlsbad.
Thanks, Chair. I want to revisit two items from previous agendas and then talk about a future agenda. But the first is I'd like to request for our November meeting, if we can, to get a report out on the survey, the member survey that we filled out in June, talking about the meetings and location and sort of the logistics of how we hold these meetings. And then secondly is to report back, to loop back on the work plan discussion that had been scheduled for July and then didn't get scheduled for here. So maybe we can do that in November. And then the third one was something that was on the tentative schedule for today, but it isn't now, is the report back on the 2025 regional plan. I know that's going to be close to the adoption hearing, but I think it would be great for us to have a discussion on comments submitted and see if there's any last input that we could provide before the board would vote on it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, and that's Kim Dodson from Caltrans.
Thank you. I have an announcement that Caltrans headquarters, the statewide sustainability transportation planning grants this year will be due November 21st, 2025. So they've shortened the date. We're going to be grading grants during holiday season. So if your agency is looking at applying for these types of funds, contact me. We will be able to kind of give like a half-hour one-to-one if you do want us to review the grant prior to submittal, and then it will go to headquarters for review. But I just wanted to make that announcement. And then we also did provide information on the BPAC for Caltrans to work with local agencies for complete streets. So that information has been provided. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, now we'll move on with item 3.1, approval of March 20th meetings, meeting minutes. Do we have any public comment on this item, clerk?
We do. We have one public comment, Chair, and that's allegedly Audra.
Thank you.
So when you're dealing with your work plan, it's a little bit terrifying to think that you guys and SANDAG and many cities haven't brought forward some more studies on fire and the complete streets and all of the things that you're doing to actually make it harder for people to leave in the event of a fire. You are, not making it easier. And we've seen what's happened with roundabouts in LA and stuff like that. So, it would behoove you guys to be working to make sure that you are not putting people in danger with your planning. And along with the environmental mitigation and the habitat conservation, this is a joke that we're spending our money on because honestly, look at the city around us. We can't even help people and we're pretending to, preserve the habitat when much of the time it turns into a landfill and it doesn't get taken care of and species are, disrupted by all of that. So, and that is also part of the United Nations Agenda 21 plan to get people out of the unincorporated areas and get them into the city. That's why you guys have these densely populated areas and everything, which is actually a fire hazard. It's like San Diego, the entire region is a high fire zone. And we're sitting here and we're doing things that are literally putting people's lives in danger to pretend to save the planet. And so I think you guys really need to start thinking about the things that you're doing and make sure that what you're doing is actually going to be helpful to anybody, or if this is something that is literally about controlling people's movement. Because that's what it is. You guys de-incentivize, you incentivize, we change behaviors to get people to do what we want. And if you listen to that, that's psychopathic behavior. I'm going to change their behavior so they do what I ask. So, you guys need to really think about what you're doing.
That concludes our public comment on this item, Chair.
Thank you, clerk. Are there any working group members that would like to comment or ask questions on this item? All right, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve, Lamesa.
Okay, motion made by Santos Lamesa. Can I have a second?
We'll do a second from El Cajon, Noah Alfie.
Thank you. Okay, I have a motion from Noah Alvey from El Cajon. First was from Santos from La Mesa. Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, any opposed? Raise your hand. And anybody who is abstaining, if you please raise your hand. Pardon me.
Am I seeing 2 abstentions? Is that from San Marcos and Oceanside?
Correct, yes,
The motion passes with 2 abstentions.
thank you. Now we will move onto item 4. I would like to introduce Jacob Armstrong from the County of San Diego, Stephen Cook from the Intersecting Metrics, and Kristen Urchitel from SANDAG, who will present on the evaluation of options of the Regional Vehicle Miles Traveled Mitigation Program.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee member, working group members. Jacob is not able to be here. He had a conflict come up. But I am Kirsten Yucatel. I am the program manager for this project on the SANDAG side. It is funded through a Caltrans planning grant, and the lead work on the project is actually undertaken by the county. Steve Cook, who is here with me, who is the county's consultant on the project. So we're here to give you an update on progress so far and what you can expect in the future.
Thank you. My name is Stephen Cook. I'm with Intersecting Metrics. As Kirsten mentioned, we're the lead consultant on the project. Kirsten mentioned that this project's being funded through a Caltrans sustainability grant. It's a partnership grant between SANDAG and the County of San Diego. The total grant amount was $480,000 with $137,000 of in-kind match in staff time, both from the county and SANDAG, to basically work on the project. And we need to have everything completed by June 30th, 2026. So we have just over 9 months from now to get this completed. So the program goals, these are the goals that were outlined by the grant. So really the first and main goal is to provide a mechanism for the entire region basically to mitigate VMT-related impacts. VMT-related impacts are a regional impact, and they need to really be, they're most effective when they're mitigated regionally. So that's kind of the purpose of this program, is to provide that regional tool to allow all the jurisdictions to help mitigate their impacts. The second is to really start to facilitate the costing of mitigation. That's one of the bigger hurdles that a lot of jurisdictions struggle with, is how much does this cost? How do we break this down? How can we kind of deal with this? And so the grant will provide that, or the program will really provide that asset to the jurisdictions. The third is to prioritize the implementation of VMT reducing infrastructure, multimodal facilities, and programs within disadvantaged communities. The fourth is to incentivize growth and development throughout the San Diego region. Incentivize sustainable growth and development within the San Diego region. And then the final is to support the implementation of VMT reducing infrastructure within the programs outlined in the 2021 regional plan, which will actually be moved to the 2025 regional plan later this year. The scope of the work of the grant, there's really 5 tasks. The first task is to establish a technical advisory committee, which we did. We've already had 4 meetings. Most of your colleagues are on that committee. It's really the transportation engineers and planners from all the different jurisdictions. They provided guidance and peer review of the efforts we've had so far. We'll kind of get into what we've done so far and how they've been involved later in the presentation. The second task is to create the evaluation criteria for the program framework and the program framework. The evaluation criteria that we developed really mirrors the goals of the program to basically make sure that whatever program we do kind of will achieve all of those goals. The third task is to develop a regional VMT mitigation program options. We'll go through the different options that we looked at and how we kind of got to our conclusions, and then ultimately the preferred option that we're going to move forward with. And then where we're at now, we're currently in the process of building the preferred program. So right now we're writing the documentation, doing the research, crunching the numbers so that hopefully in early January, we'll have a draft to share with everybody. And then finally, it's to finalize the program and basically take it to the county board and the SANDAG board. We're not looking for approval to implement, but just kind of a check off like, yes, we did achieve the goals of the grant and we have these tools available now. There we go. So other fee programs or other VMT mitigation programs throughout the state, a lot of programs are in process, but not a lot have actually been implemented yet. Luckily in San Diego, we have 2 programs that have been implemented. The first is the City of San Diego Active Transportation and Lieu Fee Program. And then Escondido I believe last year, implemented a VMT exchange program. And we'll kind of get into what those means and provide examples later in the presentation. And also last year, LA Metro developed a pilot program for an exchange bank. So LA Metro is the main transit agency in the LA area. Basically, they're taking credit for the transit improvements that they're making and selling those credits. So VMT program misconceptions. This is really what this program is not, because we've kind of had a lot of questions about this. This is not the roadway user charge. This will not be a fee that is applied to everyday citizens. This is a mitigation program that will be applied to new development that's occurring throughout the region. The program is not mandatory for jurisdictions to participate in. This is really a tool that jurisdictions can use, but it's completely at their discretion whether they want to be involved or not. The program will not allow development to move forward without doing a VMT analysis. Once again, this is a mitigation program. VMT impacts will still have to be determined, identified, and basically understand the magnitude of them. And then the program can be used as mitigation if it's within a participating jurisdiction. But the CEQA process still needs to go through. The CEQA documentation still needs to go through. The program will only kind of provide options for mitigation of VMT. And then finally, the program will not require jurisdictions to edit or amend their current transportation guidelines or thresholds. Guidelines and thresholds, they're meant for identifying impacts. Sometimes they have mitigation options within those, but this program, as I said, will be optional and it won't change those thresholds. It will just provide options for mitigation. So really there's three types of VMT mitigation programs, or just mitigation programs in general. And that's an in lieu fee, a mitigation bank, and an exchange program. So we'll go through each one individually. So a good example of an in lieu fee program, the City of San Diego's Active Transportation in lieu fee program. What happens there is a project generates VMT to have a VMT related impact. And to mitigate that impact, they'll pay a fee to a jurisdiction. And then the jurisdiction uses the revenue from that fee program to build VMT reducing infrastructure throughout their jurisdiction to really lower overall VMT within their community or their jurisdiction, and that offsets the impact of the new development. A mitigation bank is another type of mitigation program. This is what LA Metro implemented. And with a mitigation bank, really what happens is a jurisdiction builds VMT reducing infrastructure. They take credit for that. So if you build a bike lane, it's determined that that bike lane will reduce 100 VMT per day. That way, the jurisdiction can then take credit for that 100 VMT and sell it to development to basically offset their impacts. So basically, the jurisdiction builds the infrastructure, takes the credit for it, and then sells that credit. Very similar to kind of like habitat credit or biological credit programs. An exchange program, this is similar to what the City of Escondido has. That's where a project in location A basically has a VMT related impact, but they can't mitigate that on site through TDM or frontage improvements or something like that. So they work with the jurisdiction or even their own jurisdiction or a jurisdiction outside to basically say, hey, what infrastructure projects do you guys have that we could build that will help offset our impact? And so they build those programs offsite or that infrastructure offsite. And they use the VMT reduction associated with that infrastructure to offset their VMT related impact. And we're not really limited to using one program or the other. Actually, there's a lot of benefits to doing a hybrid program because it provides us the most flexibility and the most options, the most coverage to basically mitigate VMT related impacts. So we did look at hybrid programs. So how did we develop the program options that we looked at? So we started out with ideas. Kind of, there's no idea that's a bad idea. We threw everything at the wall to see what stuck. We leaned on the TAC to get ideas. We looked at what other jurisdictions are doing. We looked at theoretical white papers, and we used our program team just to develop different ideas, just to see, no limitations. What could we do? So we had all these ideas floating out there. And then we started to look at hybrid programs. So how can we take these ideas and start to stitch them together to have somewhat of a cohesive program to provide the most coverage? So we came up with 8 different, what we called high-level programs. And this is kind of stitching together all those different ideas to make sure that we provided the coverage that we needed. We took those 8 ideas to the TAC, had the TAC vote on those 8 ideas, and we refined it down to 4 kind of different program options. So then we took those four program options and we did kind of like a planning level analysis where we actually analyzed how effective they would be, how much they would cost, and really put them against the evaluation criteria that we developed, which is really the program goals, to see which idea really would accomplish the most goals and be the most effective. And that's how we got down to the preferred alternative. And that's what we're analyzing now. So what is the preferred alternative? We wanted to make sure we had both local and regional components. So from a local component, we're developing guidelines and basically materials so that each jurisdiction will have the ability to implement their own localized fee program. So the jurisdiction would be responsible for actually developing the program and collecting and spending the money, but we'll basically give them the playbook how to do it and then also give them the tools to basically calculate BMT and calculate the fair share contributions. Next, we look from a regional standpoint. We're developing a regional credit program. So this will be a program that will be available to all the jurisdictions. It's really a way for if a jurisdiction does build that kind of infrastructure that we talked about, how they can get credit for it and have kind of a regional display, a regional accountant per se, of how much credit that they've had so it can really track it. And then finally, we're also building a regional exchange program. And what this is it's a program that will help different jurisdictions communicate with developers in other jurisdictions or even within their own jurisdiction to really say, here's the infrastructure that we have, the unfunded infrastructure within our CIP that could help reduce infrastructure, and advertise that to new development to basically say, hey, here's a list of things that you could build to help offset your impacts. So it's really a good communication device. So what are the next steps? So we're currently developing the program, as we mentioned. We will also develop the local program nexus study, and it won't be a nexus study that local jurisdictions will be able to adopt, but it's kind of like it will provide all the framework. So with limited effort, the jurisdictions will be able to implement their own nexus study if they choose. We'll review the draft program with the technical advisory committee once that's done. We're hoping to do that late October, early November. Basically, that'll be their first impression of the documents that we'll provide for the program and get their feedback. We're hoping to get their feedback sometime between October and the new year. So that way we can implement their feedback into the draft documents and finalize the program sometime in January, February timeframe. And that just basically mirrors the schedule that we just mentioned. So, but here's a much more detailed schedule of both where we've been and where we're going. So that's the end of the program, or that's the end of the presentation. Any questions?
Thank you, Stephen. I think we're going to look to the public first for comments before we go for comments and questions from the members here. Clerk, do we have any public comments?
We do, Chair. We have 2 public comments in person. The first is Michael Brando, followed by allegedly Audra. The item is the report that was just presented, vehicle miles traveled.
Yes. And Stephen, the consultant, presents misinformation, which is not uncommon. I wonder how much Stephen's paid to provide this misinformation. He said that this is initially for new developments. If you do look at Agenda 21 and the broader picture, this is eventually going to come to regions, specifically commuters, travel. He also mentioned that the county of San Diego is involved in this. Well, how interesting is that? When we have treasonous people that cannot do good work and probably provide misinformation to them. For example, Tara Lawson-Remer recently said that it's unfortunate that we cannot control free speech. Thereby, she's saying that she wants to control free speech. How about that? Also with the County of San Diego and its egregious behavior is the Department of Animal Services. If you look on KPBS, a report yesterday about all of the dead dogs, and Rachel Borelli, the Assistant Director of the Department of Animal Services, basically calling dogs pieces of shit. KPBS reported this. So back to this item. How do you expect to implement something like this and try to maintain this level of control when the county can't even do its basic function? I took transit here today just to see what it was like to ride on the rail, and I saw homeless people all over the place, people sleeping in the streets, urinating, defecating. And yet you step up here and say you're going to do all this grand plan. Again, I'm going to repeat what I opened the meeting with. You will not prevail. You have already failed. We do not consent and we will not comply. How good can it get?
Next is allegedly Audra.
Can get real good. So it's interesting that we're talking about this and how even Tara Lawson-Remer herself said that the vehicle miles traveled mitigation, there is no data to prove that it works. So you guys are sitting here doing all of this stuff, incentivizing, de-incentivizing, trying to build, like you're actually impeding production because you're sitting here saying like, we got to make sure that this is going to cut down travel of people and so that they'll get out of their cars and walk and bike and take public transit. It's all a facade and you guys you don't have data to prove it works. You're not going to have that data because you're not even doing studies to prove that everything you're doing is actually going to help. But you do it anyway. Because you just get information passed down. That's the sad thing is people don't really want to, do anything and educate themselves. They'd rather have somebody hand them the information and just spread it back, right? Because you get paid to do it. And then you have people come in and serve up propaganda. And it's sad because it's like people believe that stuff and you're sitting here talking about buying and selling credits. Like, okay, if I don't fart today and Michael wants to, I'll go ahead and let him do it because I'll be saving some, whatever. It's like, it's just a bunch of nonsense that we sit here and talk about it like it's something that you can like have a credit for. Like, do you guys not see the way that you talk? Like, I don't know if you can step outside yourself for a minute and listen to that kind of stuff when you're like, well, I'm going to incentivize this. Okay. When they have to do that, it's just like the COVID vaccine, right? It'll give you donuts every day for a year. How cool is that? Just for you to take a bioweapon. Whatever you guys are being incentivized by isn't going to be worth what you're implementing because you and your families will suffer the consequences.
Thank you. Your time has expired. That concludes our public comment, Chair.
Thank you, Clerk. At this time, do we have any working group members that have questions or comments on this item? Yes, Ms. Santos.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your presentation. So my question is, you had mentioned in regards to the mitigation program, if it was within a participating jurisdiction, but you said that it was optional. Is there an opt-in process for this program?
Yeah, so each jurisdiction will have to opt in to actually participating in the program. We're not going to assume that any jurisdiction is automatically in.
Do you have an idea of what that looks like, the opt-in process?
It's draft, but basically it'd be signing up on a website, just providing the contact information of the person at the jurisdiction that would lead the effort, or not lead the effort, but who would be contacted if someone was interested.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the members? Yes, Mr. Can't see your sign.
Oh, sorry.
Lucchini.
Seth Lichny, City of San Diego. Steve, just a real quick question. Would there be any proximity requirements for a regional exchange program? Would there need to be the project be located close to the VMT reduction measure in order for it to qualify?
No, VMT is a regional issue. So I should amend that. It depends on how the jurisdiction standards are set up. If your standard is based on citywide VMT instead of regional VMT, you might need to look at that because you're really measuring the VMT within your city and mitigating against that. But if you use the regional VMT standard, then really if you reduce VMT anywhere within the region, you're mitigating your impact.
Yes.
Hello, Crystal Nahar from the City of Encinitas. Encinitas is currently working on a similar program for our city, as probably many other cities are. And one of the things that we're doing is planning to claim credits, greenhouse gas emission credits in our climate action plan for the future project. So if we were to work with this regional project, do you know how the ultimate greenhouse gas emissions credits might be able to be applied? Would they be to the city or to the region or to the county?
So from a greenhouse gas standpoint, this program doesn't really factor that in because it's really just looking at VMT. One of the things that I will admit we are looking at specifically with a credit is if you use the mitigation for something else, can you also use it for this? It's called additionality. It's kind of like the theory of if it would have happened without the program or it would have happened regardless, like a frontage improvement. Like that's not really mitigation. So can you take credit for a frontage improvement because it would happen irregardless of the program? That's really what we're looking at right now. And we do have attorneys that come specialize in that exact thing, looking at it. So I can't answer that at this exact moment, but we should have some clarification by the time the program is actually ready to present.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you very much. We'll now move on to item 5. I would like to introduce Anna Bettis, Senior Regional Planner, and Samaya Elder, Associate Regional Planner, who will present an overview on the draft Regional Climate Action Roadmap and seek feedback.
Good afternoon, everyone. Anna Bettis, Senior Planner here at SANDAG, and joined by my colleague Samaya Elder, an Associate Planner on our team. Appreciate the time to speak with you all this afternoon. You might remember that we last came to you in January to share the draft greenhouse gas reduction measures for the Regional Climate Action Roadmap that our team has been working on. And since then, we've been working closely, coordinating with your staff to develop the rest of the Climate Action Roadmap. And we're here today to provide you with an update on that as we prepare to share the roadmap for public comment. And keep an eye out that we're anticipating that it'll be posted in the next several days, and you should get an email from the staff liaison for this working group with the link where you can access the roadmap and where public comments can be made. So on our agenda for today's presentation, I will kick us off with a brief overview of the grant that's supporting this work. Then I'll provide an update on the progress that we've made. And then I'll turn it over to my colleague Samaya, who will talk about our approach to developing the roadmap. And then finally, she'll close us out with looking ahead at what's next. So with that, let's get started. For some background, SANDAG received a planning grant from the Environmental Protection Agency to produce 3 deliverables. The first was the Priority Climate Action Plan, which focused on how to reduce emissions through 2030 from the highest emitting sectors, and that was completed in March of last year. The second, which we're focusing on for today's presentation, is the Climate Action Roadmap, which is a vision for reducing economy-wide emissions through 2045. And then finally, we'll be reporting out on progress made in 2027. So with that, let's transition to talk more about what you can expect to see in the forthcoming draft Regional Climate Action Roadmap. So I'll start with the greenhouse gas inventory. We worked with the Energy Policy Initiative Center, or EPIC, at the University of San Diego to develop an updated greenhouse gas inventory for the region for the year 2022. As you may know, EPIC has worked with many local governments on local climate action plans and has also prepared the regional greenhouse gas inventories for the last 3 regional plans. The inventory is shown on the pie chart on this slide, and as you can see, transportation remains the largest source of emissions in the region, followed by electricity, natural gas for buildings, and industrial emissions. The regional greenhouse gas inventory is included in both the forthcoming Climate Action Roadmap and also in Appendix G of the draft 2025 Regional Plan. And I also want to highlight here, since I mentioned the regional plan, that the Sustainable Community Strategy for the regional plan is focused on how to reduce emissions just from that dark blue section on the pie chart that's labeled passenger and light duty vehicles, whereas the roadmap is a vision that explores opportunities to reduce emissions across all sectors. So using that 2022 inventory as our base year, the roadmap provides a vision for how our region can work collaboratively to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And more specifically, it shows how the region could reduce emissions 47% below 2022 levels by 2035 through coordinated regional action and additional funding. and how we can make substantial progress toward a 2045 goal of reducing emissions by 83% below 2022 levels. And these two goals for reducing emissions near and long term were selected to be consistent with the timeframes in many local climate action plans and to align with state goals. And you can get more information on how those two, the near-term and long-term goals, were established in Appendix C of the roadmap, if you'd like to read more about that. And so to get there, the roadmap includes 23 greenhouse gas reduction measures covering 8 sectors. And I'll note that since we last saw you, you might notice we've added one additional sector, and that's water. And that was really in response to the input that we've received during the outreach and engagement that we've conducted to develop the roadmap. The roadmap also contains several analyses, which include looking at how the measures could reduce air pollution, the anticipated workforce needs, and how the measures could improve quality of life for residents in the region. And with that, I'll hand it over to Samaya to talk more about our approach for developing the roadmap. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Yes, now that you've heard an overview of what's in the roadmap, I want to just take a bit of a step back and talk about how we've got to where we are now, as well as what's coming next. So we've used several different outreach methods to develop the roadmap. This slide covers just the first 3, so I'll touch on more in just a moment. But starting at the top, we've held bi-monthly interagency meetings to gather ongoing feedback on the scoping and direction of the roadmap, and that's included local jurisdictions, regional and state agencies, as well as tribes. In addition to these ongoing interagency meetings, we held a series of technical stakeholder meetings in fall of last year while we were developing the draft greenhouse gas reduction measures. This really allowed us to gather more detailed, granular level technical input from practitioners and subject matter experts. And then we've also held 2 regional workshops focused on the roadmap. One was in July of 2024, and the second was in February 2025, so earlier this year. And I'll mention this again later, but we actually have a third one planned for October. These workshops convene local jurisdictions, public agencies, CBOs, environmental groups, and other regional climate stakeholders to provide input, at key milestone points for the roadmap. The photo on the slide here is from our February workshop, where we had more than 60 attendees representing 43 different organizations and agencies, so we were pretty happy about that turnout. Continuing on with outreach, we've also been coming to SANDAG working groups and policy advisory committees at key milestone points. And then lastly, we've conducted significant community outreach and engagement, which includes a public survey that we did earlier this year. The survey was available online, and we also made paper copies available at community events, so these two kind of go hand in hand. And I'll be touching on the survey results more in just a moment, but as part of the overarching outreach strategy, I wanted to highlight that partnering with CBOs has been a really critical piece. They've been conducting roadmap outreach and education in their communities, and they really helped with gathering survey responses, which is what the image on the slide here is showing. So I just want to acknowledge all of the work that they've done on this. Okay, so as promised, diving into the survey results more. I know there's a lot on this slide. I'm going to walk through it briefly to provide an overview of all of the results, and then we'll focus on the next slide on our key takeaways and outcomes from the survey. So this graphic is showing the list of all the strategies that were included in the survey. So those are the text on the left-hand side here. These were developed based on our research of common actions included in local climate action plans. As Anna mentioned earlier, things that we heard through outreach and engagement, including building off of what we heard when we were developing the priority climate action plan in 2023 and 2024. This list essentially served as our initial ideas for the greenhouse gas reduction measures in the roadmap. And then the survey asked people to indicate how important they felt each of the strategies are. So the response options are listed at the top. They were don't know, very not important, important, or very important. And in total, we received nearly 700 survey responses, which was really great to see. We then used a weighted scoring process to rank each of the strategies by how important people thought they were. You can see under each of the text response options, that is the weight that was assigned to each time that was selected. And so ultimately what this graphic is showing is the weighted scores and the ranking for each of the strategies. So the scores are in white, kind of on the right side of the purple bars. A couple of things I want to quickly highlight about the results before we dive into the takeaways. One, you can see that the range of the scores of all of the strategies hover right around important to very important. So overall, everything included in the strategy was pretty well received. And if anything, the ones that scored lower are, using the weighted scoring process are the ones that had more don't know responses. So that indicates an opportunity for more outreach and education on those topics. Also want to acknowledge that this list includes both strategies that reduce the sources of greenhouse gas emissions as well as carbon sinks, which are strategies to capture and store carbon. And so while the roadmap is primarily focused on reducing the sources of GHG emissions, you can see that the carbon sinks related strategies also ranked pretty well. And so we do touch on that throughout the roadmap too. So with that high level snapshot, we're going to take a closer look at the key takeaways from the survey and how they're reflected in the roadmap. So the top 3 climate actions that people wanted most were 1, planting more trees in city areas, and that's captured in the national working land sector. Second is protecting and restoring more natural habitats, which is also reflected in 2 places in the natural and working land sector. And then third is faster and better public transit, and that's reflected in the transportation sector. So now that you've heard what's in the roadmap and how we got there, we'll be moving on to our next steps. The main thing that I want to highlight here for you today is that we'll be publishing the draft roadmap for public comment very soon on the SANDAG website. As Anna mentioned, once it's made available, it'll be at sandag.org/cap or CAP. And we'll be working and coordinating with the staff liaisons for this working group to provide an update once that is available. The public comment period is anticipated to be open through October 17th. So we're really looking forward to hearing from you and others at your jurisdictions and organizations. As I mentioned earlier, we'll also be hosting another 3rd regional workshop for the roadmap in early October to get feedback from our regional stakeholders, as well as continuing to present to working groups and culminating with the Regional Planning Committee on October 3rd. And then lastly, we'll be taking all of the input that we receive over this public comment period and incorporating it to finalize the roadmap by December 1st for submittal to the EPA. So that concludes our update on the Regional Climate Action Roadmap today, and we're happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll ask the clerk if we have any public comments on this item.
We do. We have 2 in-person public comments, and first one is Michael Brando, followed by allegedly Audra.
What was interesting is what was omitted from Samaya Elder's report. I'm going to ask the question, why is geoengineering not ever mentioned in these organizations? It's not mentioned at the county. It's not mentioned at City of San Diego. And yet that topic is on the table at the national level, geoengineering. When we start off with the beautiful blue sky, San Diego day, and you see all the spraying in the sky, they're not condensation trails. Everyone knows what's going on. They spread out, fan out, and they create a screen between us and the sun. That's coming to light. There are even some states that are actually looking at drafting legislation to ban that. And yet, this presentation doesn't address that at all. Why is that? I can tell you part of why that is. It's because of this thing called fake science that's called science with a $sign. Science spelled with the $sign, where these illegitimate organizations are using false data to try to promote what they want to achieve, which is control, the theme I started the meeting out with. I'm going to leave it here. The more you try to control others, life, creation, the more out of control you get. Think about that. Think about that carefully. The more you try to control others, life, creation, the more out of control you get. And of course, that has to do with systemic institutional narcissism, which SANDAG is riddled with. Again, you will not prevail. You have already failed. We do not consent. We will not comply. How good can it get?
Our next public comment is by allegedly Audra.
restore natural habitat. Love when people talk about that and then you see the world around us and you're like, please don't touch it. Yeah, why don't we ever talk about the real important things? If we care about the planet, it should bother you that they spray nanoparticulates that are highly deadly to the people. It's like nano poison up in the sky that falls down on the people, right? It's really good for us. Even human DNA is sprayed and nanothermite. Good thing for those fires, right? It just really lights up real quick. But no need to look at that. No need to look at cloud seeding, right? Just like what happened before the January storm up at Santa Ana. And they did it already many decades ago in San Diego, and people died because it wound up flooding. And then you guys can't even take care of the infrastructure. But it's just interesting because we're putting people in cement prisons, and you guys talk about air pollutants, but again, it's like you don't talk about chemtrails or any of those things. And HARP is also something that they use to direct the weather. You guys should educate yourself on these types of things instead of just looking at people like they're crazy and saying things. And why don't we talk about airplane emissions? And all the people that are pushing this climate stuff are the ones with personal jets, but that's cool. And I'm wondering how we're going to be saving greenhouse gases with wastewater. Is that the idea, to give us back our own sewage so that we're going to save greenhouse gases, right? Whose idea was that? How cool is it to drink your own sewage and everybody else's? And then we don't ever go to Mexico and say, are you going to mitigate your VMTs? No, we're just going to pay the price because we care more about commerce with Mexico than actually doing something like having them stop shitting in our yard. Instead, we're more concerned about giving them tax or toll revenue. And so also the heavy duty trucks, like everything you guys want to do with making everything electric, you're severely going to impede commerce. But that's okay, right? As long as we pretend to save the planet, it doesn't matter who and what we sacrifice to do it.
That concludes our public comment on this item, Chair.
Thank you, Clerk. At this time, we'll ask any members here at the board if they have any comments or questions on this item. Yes, Crystal.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. And I was curious if you could elaborate on, once the roadmap has been adopted, how SANDAG will be using it, and then also how the member agencies might be able to utilize it within our jurisdictions as well.
Sure, thank you for the question. We're not going to be formally adopting the roadmap, but when we complete it, we'll submit it to the EPA and have the revised version based on what we hear during the public comment period available on our website. We see this as a resource to help us work together collaboratively in the region to seek funding to implement these measures. Certainly there's some in there where SANDAG has the authority to do them, and there's a lot of sectors there. There's others that different agencies would be taking the lead on. But our thought here is that when you're seeking funding, you're able to make the case that whatever program or project you're moving forward, it's moving forward this larger vision that we have for the region. It's not just sort of a one-off. So yeah, we look forward to working with you and other agencies on how we can implement.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. I was wondering if later on, will there be even more feedback that we can give after the roadmap is kind of implemented and out there?
Yeah, we do have a progress report that we're going to be submitting to EPA in 2027. So certainly if you have feedback for us during that time, we'd love to hear from you, or I guess we're open to hearing what you have to say. Thanks.
Thanks. And Brent Boyd, you had a comment?
Yeah, Brent from MTS. I'm curious about the transit aspect. I was curious on slide 5. You have a breakdown by the GHG emissions by type of output, I guess. I was wondering if we have that broken out, where public transportation fits in there, and if we know what percentage of that is public transportation.
I might turn this. We do have Naomi Wentworth with USD EPIC here, who worked on the greenhouse gas inventory. Is that a question that you know the answer to, Naomi? Yeah, thank you for the question.
Hi, is this on? Sorry. Yes, so we do have public transit in the inventory. It's split up based on type of public transit. So if it's passenger rail or trolley, that's going to be in the rail sector. You can see that's the smallest sliver, 0.1% of the inventory. Buses, those are going to be in passenger and light duty vehicles.
And do we know, we don't have to know it now, but if we can get the numbers about what percentage of that is comprised of transit, that could help us in like grant applications, that type of thing.
Sure, yeah, that's definitely something we can pull out. I don't have it off the top of my head,
Right,
but.
all right. If we can get that later, that'd
Yeah.
be great. All right, thank you.
I can make a note to follow up on that.
Okay, great,
Thanks.
thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board committee? Yes.
Sorry, Darlene Nicandro with the City of Oceanside. I have one more question. So I know that the chart looks at, what is contributing to the GHG, but when you talked about the public comments that people gave, and a lot of it was about, wanting to plant more trees and things like that, is there going to be kind of like a equivalent chart showing how many, how do I say it? What the contribution of each additional tree, for example, would do in terms of reducing greenhouse gases?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'll speak on that first, and then I might ask Naomi to also speak to the quantifications. But I know we gave a really high-level overview in the presentation. In the draft roadmap for each of the measures, we've quantified what the greenhouse gas reductions could be. And we have some technical appendices laying out what our assumptions are on that. For the tree one, I don't know that we go down to the level of a tree, but I can have her talk more about maybe some of the assumptions that we've made there. But we do have, like I said, the quantifications for what the greenhouse gas reductions could be from each measure. Yeah, I'll turn it to. The question was, I'll just repeat. The question was around, are we quantifying the greenhouse gas reductions from individual trees?
Yeah, so for the roadmap, because we're doing kind of an economy-wide scale of these big regional measures, we're primarily looking at like a top-down analysis. So we're saying if we have, in that example, like acres of trees, not an individual tree in an individual jurisdiction. Same is true for really all of the sectors. We're looking at these kind of broad sweeping reduction programs that aren't necessarily that will then have to look to the implementation scale to see like what specific programs are going to build up to that larger goal. Does that answer the question?
We have another question from Lynette Santos La Mesa.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So I was wondering, so the public survey results, will those be aligned by sector? So you see several, say, related to building and housing and ways to become more efficient in those areas. But are you looking at those actions or tasks, milestones by sector, and how much of a reduction in GHG you're going to obtain per sector? Because it's a economic-wide GHG program, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So for the survey, I believe almost every strategy in here listed in this graphic has a match in what's now reflected in the draft roadmap for each of the measures. So they are all incorporated in the measures, and then the measures themselves are quantified for their emission reduction. So short answer is yes.
All right, anyone else? Thank you very much. All right, we'll be moving along to our last item, item 6, Regional Reconnecting Communities Study. And I would like to introduce Lizzie Havey, Associate Regional Planner, and Santiago Bustamante, Regional Planner 1, who will present an overview on Reconnecting Communities Study and request feedback.
Hi, everyone. My name's Lizzie Havey, and I'm a regional planner here at SANDAG, and I'm the project manager for the Reconnecting Communities study.
Hi, everyone. My name is Santiago Bustamante, also working as a regional planner in this study.
To introduce the study a little bit, overall, the study aims to define and identify project opportunities and strategies that will reconnect communities divided by harmful transportation infrastructure. To give some context before diving into the study, we want to define what is reconnecting communities. So transportation at its best is a uniter, connecting people and communities with convenient and safe access to jobs, family, services. Transportation at its worst is a barrier, dividing communities, increasing harms, and cutting off access to opportunity. Knowing this, we know that where we plan and build transportation projects impacts our communities. Looking back in history, construction of transportation infrastructure, such as highways, harmed existing communities by displacing residents and local businesses and by physically dividing once connected, vibrant neighborhoods. A report from the Federal Department of Transportation highlighted that highway routes were chosen where land costs were the lowest or where political resistance was the weakest, cutting through low income and communities of color more often than not. Today, reconnecting communities is an urban planning concept and effort to restore those connections and invest in neighborhoods. SANDAG applied for a Caltrans planning grant to identify and strategize with our partners on projects for reconnecting communities. We worked with Caltrans, the local agency, to kind of come up with a strategy for the region of where we can prioritize these types of projects. So here are the different tasks on the study. We've completed some of these tasks already in-house. Now, I'll provide an overview on some of those key points. Today, we're providing this overview in preparation for a joint working group where we'll be looking for more in-depth feedback and on task 5, implementation strategies and solutions. You all will be invited. We'll talk a little bit more about when that timing will be. But that task will include a suite of project opportunities for each of our identified areas to promote these reconnection opportunities, solutions, projects. One key aspect of the study is to incorporate a data forward analysis. So for the first task, we worked closely with our internal data science team. We also worked really closely and collaborated with the social equity working group to help ground truth a bit of our analysis and provide some additional insight. I'll cover that analysis briefly in the next few slides. So for the first step, we zoomed out and we said, to help us understand what is a connected community, where should these types of projects and solutions be in our region, we want to understand what is a disconnected community. This is really the basis of the analysis. And so you can see the definition here on the screen. Low-income communities that were physically separated and or displaced by transportation infrastructure, such as highways and railways that created barriers to access and opportunities, such as work, education, open spaces, medical, retail, and further burdened by safety, health, and mobility impacts and historical disinvestment. This definition helped us select the metrics that we bring into the analysis that you see now on the screen. So these metrics helped us determine where in the region the areas are most impacted. So we also made sure to focus this analysis on communities closest to transportation infrastructure, specifically highways and railways. This is a brief glance of our methodology. I won't stay here long, won't get into that, but we created a scoring system for each of those metrics that you saw, and the community scoring highest demonstrated the biggest impact among those different metrics. We have a full report on some of that task 1 analysis that I can share and I can follow up with. We did another task in-house, our best practices. I'll have Santiago share a little bit about that.
There you go. Perfect. Thanks, Leslie. So before we move into the results of the analysis that Leslie's talking about, we wanted to share a few examples of what this type of projects look like around the nation. Leslie was talking earlier today about how reconnecting communities is known as an urban planning concept and an effort to restore connections in neighborhoods affected by transportation infrastructure. But how do these projects look like in practice, right? So what you see on the screen right now is projects that fall under the umbrella of reconnecting communities. One of the key tasks here in the study, the best practices research report, showcases national case studies that successfully reconnected communities and neighborhoods around the nation. On the bottom left example, you can see a railroad underpass in Birmingham, Alabama, that was transformed into a more welcoming public space using only lighting color. This underpass intervention, for example, has contributed to the revitalization of downtown Birmingham, and the increased foot traffic in the area has benefited local businesses as well. Another example on these case studies is the one you can see on the bottom right, where highway ramp in Minneapolis was repurposed to connect the historically important neighborhood with downtown Minneapolis through a pedestrian and a bicycle bridge. All this to be said, so here are the results of the analysis. I'm going to stay on each slide for a few seconds. You can see where the map is showing purple. Those are the communities that scored the highest in the analysis. Next slide. We reviewed the areas with greater density of purple and also considered the different types of transportation infrastructure that may be creating barriers to identify the potential focus areas. From there, we identified 7 focus areas across the region, and we coordinated with the cities in each sub-region. This with the ultimate goal of identifying a suite of projects that address the transportation infrastructure, or as we have been mentioning today, the barrier, to promote safer mobility options and neighborhood connections. From those high-scoring areas that we talked about in purple, we had to narrow down to specific geographies. We did that by using factors like the proximity to the barrier, land use, population density, and the number of safety-focused network segments that were existing. The project team also conducted site visits to understand the conditions on the ground. So what you see here is an example of National Cities focus area. This allowed us to have a clearer snapshot of our focus area before we moved on to the next steps of our study. So as you can see in this slide over here, we identify the transportation barrier, the number of safety-focused networks, the land use profile, and population density estimates, as well as some initial opportunities. So next step is I'll pass it over to Lizzie. That's going to go over the schedule and the next steps for a study.
Great, thank you. So that's a little insight into the process and where we've come from on this study, some of the different tasks that we're working towards. So we've completed that data analysis and the best practices. We'll be finalizing the existing conditions shortly. We'll be moving forward into the next big task, which is really the bulk of the study, those implementation strategies and solutions for each of the focus areas. We'll be onboarding a consultant to help us a bit with that. And we'll be hosting a joint working group in early winter this year. So you all will be invited along with some of our other working groups and community groups. So really excited for that. So that was really the purpose today, provide this general overview and preparation for that joint working group. And then we'll be finalizing the study in summer of 2026. With that, we did want to come with a couple discussion questions. Is there anything about reconnecting communities that you would want to learn a bit more at the joint working group? What data or examples would be most helpful for you to see at that working group session? We think the task 1 analysis could be really helpful for your grant applications and maybe some other projects that you all might have at the cities, at your different cities. So just want to pose these questions and welcome any comments at this time too. Thank you.
Thank you. If you would keep that slide up, we'll go to public comment first, and then we'll go to the committee for any comments on your discussion questions.
Yeah, we have 2 public comments, Chair. The first is Michael Brando, followed by allegedly Audra.
Thank you.
This is one of those items that just sounds fantastic on the surface. Of course, it's a feel-good topic. It's like, oh, we're going to help the disenfranchised. We're going to help the poor people. I have a question. First question is, when we look at examining the effects of rail systems and the transportation that's already been built, well, like with earlier presentations, how come people could not see any problems beforehand by building the rail systems the way they did? How come they couldn't see those things? I have some answers for that. I don't have time for it right now. Another thing that's omitted here is the discussion about 15-minute cities. Again, it's not a conspiracy theory. 15-minute cities where illegitimate government organizations are trying to confine people to small areas to fight, quote unquote, climate change, as well as get people to move away from the suburban areas and the unincorporated areas into these tightly packed, unhealthy, unsustainable ways of living. I'm going to recommend a book. You've probably heard people talk about it before. It's called Behind the Green Mask, M-A-S-K, Behind the Green Mask. It was written by Rosa Corey. She was a far-left Democrat until she began to see what was going on with these larger plans, which I doubt Santiago and Lizzie are aware of. Again, I'm going to end with, you will not prevail. You have already failed. We do not consent, and we will not comply with your plans. How good can it get? Think about that. How good can it get?
Our next public comment by Leslie Adra.
Yes, this is what a 15-minute city is all about, being able to be connected to everything, to be able to walk and bike to wherever you need to go, to live where you work, right? That is what you're implementing. They call it complete communities, whatever you want, but this is very dangerous. And it's, you know, it's like in other countries, people are having to get a permit just to leave that kind of an area. So it's like, well, you'll get so many per year. If you want to go see your family up in North County, it's going to cost you a pretty penny. And once you have used up all of your little passes to go, you're not going to be able to go for the rest of the year. So are you guys looking forward to that, since that's what you're pushing us into? It's interesting because it's like, as we densely populate everything, I'm just wondering if, you know, this room is it got better air quality with all of you spread out like this, or should we go into the bathroom, which is probably, you know, not very big, but maybe everybody could fit in there, and let's see what the air quality is like. Do you think it's going to be better? Anybody? But let's continue to densely populate things and say that it's going to help save the planet, right? And you know, it's just interesting the way you even talk about political resistance. The weakest political resistance allowed all of these things to be implemented. Isn't that interesting? So it's the same for what you're doing, because there is no political resistance, because everybody's buying into the BS and they think, oh my gosh, we only have this much air and this much water. That's why we're giving people back our own sewage. Oh, well, people suffer. There's people dying on the streets every day. And it's like, it's just, it's really sad to see that these kind of things are happening, and they can't even keep up with the trees that are planted. So planting more wouldn't even make a difference, because we're in a
Your time
cement
has
city.
expired. That concludes our public comment on this item, Chair.
Thank you, Clerk. Now we'll go to any comments from the working group or questions. If I could ask the discussion slide from the last presentation to be put up. Any comments or questions? Yes, Noah Alvey?
Noah
I'm sorry.
Alvey with the
From
City of El Cajon.
Thanks.
I was just curious, as part of your best practices research, did you look at any public-private partnership opportunities? So I'm just thinking big picture of things that I've seen over time. So like City of Seattle, where they had, you know, decked some of their freeways and built offices above that. So utilizing the offices to kind of pay for the deck to better integrate the community across. And I think I recently saw a presentation from Caltrans where they had an example of like a college town in the Midwest where they built additional commercial across like a major thoroughfare in order, and the commercial helped to fund that grid connection.
Yes, we definitely did. We noticed that in our best practices that a lot of successful projects did include P3 partnerships for these types of projects, especially the larger scale ones, like you've mentioned, like decks or anything like that. Yeah, Santiago actually worked on that. Do you want to add anything?
No, how the best practices research report, one of the sections talks about the delivery method. So we talk about stewardship and leadership and how it was delivered, but we also talk about the economic models that were used. So that case in Seattle was one of, I think it's in there, one of the case studies. So yeah, definitely considered.
Yes, Mr.
Seth Lichney, City of San Diego. For the first bullet, I think it'd be interesting to see some of the solutions at different cost levels. So what are the low cost options, getting up to Noah's example, which tend to be kind of a high cost option as well too. So I think seeing a nice variety would be helpful.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry, Darlene Nicandro?
Yes, Darlene Nicandro, City of Oceanside. For the first question, I would be interested in understanding, how do you measure success? Earlier, Santiago was talking about how there was increased pedestrian activity going from one side to another. So, how does that happen? And then the second question up there, I would just appreciate case studies, like real world examples, and if they are looking at before and after what has happened in those areas.
Thank you.
Yes, Crystal.
Thank you. I would be curious to know how the study recommends engaging the specific community that the changes might occur in, and how they would be involved in the decision-making on what they would like to see in their community in terms of being reconnected.
Yeah, so we'll be hosting the joint working group and inviting like community groups and asking kind of our community groups, specifically working closely with our social equity working group, which is made out of these different community groups, inviting residents. And then we'll be going into the individual focus areas and hosting a workshop there in each of the 7 focus areas. So that's our plan for our engagement at this point.
Yes, just to follow up, I'm curious if the study will recommend, because this is kind of a high level region wide, but once you have kind of like specific projects that would happen in a specific area, how that engagement would happen. Does that make sense? Kind of like a proposal on how the future engagement should, recommendations or best practices for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. We have funding for the study is like the reality, to do this study and outline those different projects and solutions. We'll be working closely with each of the cities in our focus areas. So in moving any of the projects and solutions forward, it's really kind of like a partnership opportunity with the cities to work with them, help them pursue funding. If there's anything that can be folded into, future regional plan cycles or something like that, that's something that SANDAG can take on to or look into more. But that's kind of like the next stage of it. For reconnecting communities at SANDAG, we kind of have an umbrella of projects. So this is one study to kind of kick it off, but we are looking at a freeway lit in Barrio Logan. There's a study underway for that. So there's a couple other examples of how we're pushing forward some other projects, but.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you all for the recommendations. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So that concludes all our items except 7, which is to adjourn the meeting. But before that, I wanted to remind you that our next meeting will be scheduled for Thursday, November 20th at 1:30 p.m. Thank you all for being here today. Meeting's adjourned.